I am Brad Keelor. He is Glen Andersen. Next up on Director's Cut, find out what he learned about dam safety in Central Florida and why it required an auger. Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Director's Cut. My name is Brad Keelor. I'm the director of the Geo-Institute, and that is why we call this show Director's Cut. Every single week, every 7 days, I talk to another Geo-Institute member who will tell us stories about themselves. Some are personal, some are professional. Every last single one of them is fun. If you do not know anything about the Geo-Institute, you should head over to geoinstitute.org. When you do that, you will find out we are a technical society with about 12,000 members, most of whom are geotechnical engineers and or geologists. We are housed within the American Society of Civil Engineers. If you like what you see today, you should click subscribe, you should click get notifications, and we will let you know every time we post something to our YouTube channel, like these excellent episodes of Director's Cut. With that said, I would now like to welcome my guest this week from Central Florida, coming to us live from there, the principal geotechnical engineer from Wood. It is Glen Andersen. Glen, how are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I am great. I am ready for yet another episode of Director's Cut. I think everybody knows how it works, but just in case they don't, we have 10 questions. 2 of them we ask every guest every week, and we start with one of those. Describe your job in 45 seconds.
I'm a principal geotechnical engineer with Wood here in Central Florida, as Brad said. Most of what I do is find ways to solve clients' problems. I have a wide variety of interests, anything from soft ground to karst conditions, but essentially helping structural engineers, architects, clients, owners to manage better manage their resources. We do a lot of analysis. We do a lot of historical data evaluation. I find that's something that as geotechs we don't really do a lot of, but in my group that's what we do. We start every project by looking back at the history, and then we make decisions about how to approach problems, and then we go through the analyses, make recommendations, and then help produce designs.
That is great. I have to ask a follow-up question right away, or a bonus question, as we like to say. When you guys go through that historical data, I mean, we have this effort that we're trying to put together called DIGS right now that would standardize geotechnical reporting. You can get wildly different stuff depending on the location of the site. I mean, depending on, if it was federal land or not, obviously that makes a big difference. How do you go about this? I mean, and what do you do if there's just nothing to find?
Well, there's always something to find. One of the nice things that I found recently is historical topographic maps that are put out by the USGS. So whenever we're looking at a site, for example, in Florida, there's a lot of karst issues. I'll go into that database and see how far back. I had a job a while ago out in Baton Rouge, where I actually pulled up a topographic map that was developed before the turn of the century, before it was at 1890 or something. It was on the Mississippi River of all places. But we have that, and then in Florida they have a lot of historical aerial photographs. So I'll start from a gross, a global look at the whole area and tell me what's happening historically, and then drill in and usually, more often than not, you get a good idea of what's happening before you actually start addressing the problem at hand.
And that's a great way to start, with a shout out to USGS there. And if anybody ever gets the opportunity to visit USGS headquarters in Reston, ask them to take you to the map room, or the map library, excuse me, you will be blown away. It is very cool. So we also have to ask a lot of fun questions while we're on Director's Cut. And so we're going to hit you with one of those right away here. What is your all-time favorite wild animal, and why, I guess, is the follow-up?
I think it would have to be a moose. And the reason for that is I've been around some wild animals, but I had the opportunity one time to go to Fairbanks, Alaska, of all places, and for a series of meetings. And in between the meetings, they took us up to the Cold Regions Research Laboratory. They have a permafrost tunnel up there. And while we're driving up there, we're driving along this highway, and I see this huge animal with these huge antlers, and it was a moose, and it was shocking. And I guess I've learned after the fact that they're extremely dangerous animals. But I guess it was that encounter that close to a moose that I'd say that's probably my favorite wild animal.
And I think until you see one up close like that, I think a lot of people assume it's just like a deer with bigger antlers. They are much larger than deer.
Yes. Yes.
So we got a little bit into this after the first question, but now we're going to get a little more specific. And so I have to ask you, you have a lot of technical areas of expertise. If you look at your LinkedIn profile, it's very long. There's a lot of different stuff on there. What technical area of your job now would you never trade away? And what's one thing that you think you could do without?
I guess I follow after my one of my mentors, Chuck Ladd. He was my PhD advisor in terms of soil behavior, and so I think that's probably my most interesting technical area is to understand soil behavior, whether it be soft ground or expansive soils, or what I'm dealing with now is karst features in Florida. So yeah, that would be my most interesting aspect, would be to understand how the soils are going to behave. And then I don't know that there's one that I can do away with. I think that every aspect of geotechnical engineering has been important to me in one way or another, depending on the project. And so I really don't have a least favorite area. I need them all.
That's great. And it keeps people showing up at your door with projects, I bet, too, when you get that longer list.
That's true.
So we have a lot of favorite questions here on Director's Cut, where we ask people about their favorite things. This one I used a different word, and I said ideal. You have to think about a long day, you come home at night. What is your ideal dinner? Or maybe there's a Sunday one that you love to have. And we gotta go A to Z here.
Okay, well, and I guess you're going to have to understand, I think out of the box a lot. I don't, my mind isn't always going in the same direction as most people. And I have to say that my favorite dinner is actually breakfast. I hate to say that, and one of my favorite breakfasts that I like is Eggs Benedict. And I just recently figured out how to cook it and make it look like it came from a restaurant. So that would be my ideal dinner, would be a really nice breakfast, maybe Eggs Benedict Florentine, with spinach or something like that.
So what was your secret? Was there one thing that was missing that you couldn't figure out for years, or did it just kind of come together gradually over time?
Well, I had never actually done it. I'd eaten them before, and I really like them, but I'd never actually done it. So I tried it the first time. And what you have to do is you actually have to spin the water in the pot. So you bring the water to a boil, and then you spin it around. And I was reading the instructions, but I didn't watch a video, and I put the egg in wrong. You're supposed to put the egg right in the center, so that as it's spinning around, the yolk, the egg white will wrap around the egg, and it'll harden right there in center. I put it on the outside, and I messed it up. So I ended up with like egg drop soup rather than. But the next time around, I figured out, okay, you got to get it spinning enough, and then you put the egg right in the center, and it works perfectly every time.
I guess the follow-up question to that is there any breakfast food that you don't like, that you would never have for dinner?
Corned beef hash. I don't like that.
That was really quick that you came up with that too. I hope there wasn't any scarring experience with that.
No, it's just it just the taste, the texture. I like hash browns, love hash browns, but mixed corned beef in it, and no, it just doesn't work for me.
Well, that's a good story though, and now maybe everybody will go out there and try to make themselves some eggs Benedict after this. Early in your career, you spent some significant time in academia, actually, in a few different places. And I think one of the things I always wonder when I interview somebody like you who went either from the academic world to practice or the other way around is how the transition was. What was difficult about it? What was really easy? And so how was your transition from the academic world to practice?
It was actually a little rough on a couple of points. First of all, I had been in academics long enough that I was making good money, but I didn't have any consulting experience. And so when I was interviewing for a consulting position, I found that there was a big difference in salary expectations. So I took a huge cut in salary, and it took me several years to get back up to where I was as a professor. But the other thing I think that was hard about it was that my mindset as a professor was always looking to find problems, interesting problems that no one had thought about before, and then doing research to solve the problems, and changing the mindset over from finding problems to solving a real problem. And it took me probably about 4 or 5 months of consulting with us. It's a small group. They're still active. Burns Cooley Dennis in Jackson, Mississippi. Wonderful guys. For me to finally get the mentality of getting to a solution quickly and efficiently. And I remember I had a job. Larry Cooley was the president of Burns Cooley Dennis at the time. Wonderful guy. And he gave me a job. It was for a fire academy. It was a dormitory for a fire academy, and it was on a site that had all Yazoo clay at the surface, from the surface down, so very highly expansive. We had to set the whole thing up on a void space with drilled shafts and whatnot. I went through the entire project. I laid out the borings. I directed the field crew. I looked at the soil samples when they came back in, did the initial classifications, ordered the testing, interpreted the results, did the analysis, wrote the report, and put it out. Didn't really think anything of it. A few weeks later, Larry Cooley comes back to my office, and it was a $20,000 project, plus or minus. He came back into my office. He said, "Glenn, do you realize that you did that for $2,000 under budget?" And I went, "Yes, I finally figured out how to make a profit." And you know, people may not believe this, but getting a PhD is actually easier than it is to make a profit in a consulting environment. There's far more variables that you have to deal with, and so I find it very exciting.
That's a great answer. Very complete. So I guess the follow-up to that is, you know, we had Silas Nichols on the show last week, and he had just hit his 20th work anniversary with FHWA, and we talked a little bit about the value that he saw in staying in one place that long and what it had meant to his career. You've had various positions. Even during the time you were in academia, you moved around a little bit. So I don't know if it's a rebuttal so much, because everybody has different career advice, but what's your career advice then to somebody starting out? What was the advantage to you of moving around so much?
Well, in academics, when that was my career path, each step was a step to a more reputable program. So it was actually a step up. But then the as I mentioned earlier, going from academics to consulting, that was actually I think it was probably a 30% pay cut to do that. But then in consulting, your value as a consulting engineer is your ability to solve problems. And what I found in my career is that I could learn figure out how to solve problems, become very efficient at it. But I was practicing. Our consulting geotechnical engineering is more locally based. So I was practicing in areas, for example, my first was highly expansive clays, but I wasn't getting much soft ground experience. And so I had an opportunity to move from there. I went up to Ohio and started working in a glacial environment, and found that opportunity, that was very interesting, totally different challenges. And then from there, I moved down to New Mexico. And I found New Mexico has the widest variety of soil types and rock types, and got involved in a lot of rock mechanics there. So, and every time that I was making that change, I was learning more. I've been all over the country, and so I have a whole bunch of different experience. So I was becoming a better consultant, but then I was also having opportunities to advance my career. So I guess I would be kind of opposite of Silas's opinion. It was actually very beneficial because I've been able to practice all over the country. And now I've got people will call me up. We're doing a job right now just outside of Houston, and I have a lot of experience in Houston. We did a job up in Iowa. I've got experience up in the upper Midwest, in Ohio. And all of that has helped me to be be more beneficial to our practice. So I would recommend to people starting out, take opportunities, do things. I heard, I think it might have been who was it that Jim Mitchell from Berkeley came one time while I was at MIT, and he spoke to the graduates, and he goes, there's a lot of difference between having the same experience over 10 years or having 10 years of experience in 1 year, or 10 different experiences in 1 year. And that's always kind of stuck with me, to look for opportunities to diversify your understanding and always learn. I never stop learning.
Words to live by, I think. Thanks for that. That is excellent advice. And I know we have a lot of students that watch this show, so I hope they can take something away every time we talk about career advice. So the other question that we ask everybody that comes on the show is, how did you first get involved in ASCE and GI?
Well, actually, when I first got involved, it was ASCE. There was no Geo-Institute. Right. And I got involved as an undergraduate student at Brigham Young University. We had a class where it was kind of a career development type class, but it was a meeting of all of the students in the chapter there, and I joined ASCE as well. I guess I was a sophomore at the time, and just have always stuck with it. And then when the Geo-Institute came along, of course, it was just natural to move over and do that. And throughout my career, I have benefited greatly from ASCE in terms of the articles. A lot of things that I've learned have been, in terms of how to practice, come directly out of articles published by ASCE. And so, I mean, it's been invaluable for my career.
So a little feather in the cap for our publications team there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I would turn that right around, and I would say that the ASCE and GI are better for having volunteers like you and all of our members. It really is something, there's 5.5 of us on staff here. We could never, ever, ever do everything that GI does without the help of our volunteers. So we really appreciate that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So now another one that you're going to have to think hard about, or maybe not. I feel like I phrased some of your questions negatively, and I feel bad for that. Is there anything in your life, as you think back, either personal or professional, that you've tried really, really hard to like, but just can't? Whether it was a type of music or a particular sport or any art or anything like that.
I had to think long and hard about that one, and I guess what I would say is you always see people relaxing on a beach with the sun setting, and just enjoying the quiet moment. And I can do that for a short period of time, but then it becomes very boring. So I wish that I could just go out and just spend hours just sitting and watching things, and I do spend time doing that, but it's something I just can't I can't spend an entire day sitting and watching. There's too much to go, too much I would like to do. So
I'm with you on that. What's your ideal vacation then? What do you love to do when you get away?
Well, up until about a year ago, I had a motorcycle, and I ride. And a friend of mine let me borrow his Harley the other day, and I got to ride it again. But one of the funnest things that I like to do is to ride motorcycles. There's just no way you experience you smell the where you're going through. You smell nature and just the wind in your face, and there's nothing to compare it. There's another thing that I really like to do, but I haven't been able to do, and I'm not sure I will be able to do, is to do cross-country skiing, especially after freshly fallen snow. And I used to, when I was up in Ohio during the winter, I'd take my skis with me, and over the lunch break, I'd go into one of the state parks and cross-country ski through the state park. But living in about 15 years ago, my wife drew a line across the center of the United States. She's originally from Utah, but she doesn't like the cold weather. And she said, "You shall not pass." And so we are on the southern side of the U.S. now.
And I guess people probably look at you a little weird if you got the cross-country skis out and started doing that down there. So I have to ask you, working for Wood and a lot of the research topics and a lot of the geotechnical topics that you've worked on throughout your career kind of straddle that barrier between geotech and environmental. I mean, some people might argue there is no barrier, but I wanted to ask you, is there enough collaboration between the geotechnical and environmental engineering fields? Where do you think it's working really well, and where could it be improved that you've seen throughout your career?
I would say that there's not enough, and maybe I would broaden the question to not just include environmental engineering, but structural engineering, water engineering. I don't believe as geotechnical engineers that we have really done a good job at selling who we are. I think that we also, as geotechnical engineers, underappreciate our own value. And part of that, I'm going to get philosophical right now, okay?
That's what Director's Cut is about, Glenn. Bring it on.
Part of that is because of where we come from. Geotechnical engineering was not the first civil engineering discipline. It was born out of problems that people had where they didn't understand how to build with the soil and rock conditions, and the Panama Canal was a big reason for that. They started digging the canal, and they started having all of these failures, and they needed someone who understood what the strength of soils and rock are, and so we were brought in after the fact to solve a problem. And I think, unfortunately, we still have a little bit of that mentality. Now I know as consulting engineers that we will get a call and say, can we get some soil borings? And whenever I hear that term, soil borings, it tells me that the person doesn't understand what it is that we do. And unfortunately, we'll respond by going out and taking borings and testing and writing a report. And it's like we're responding to a problem rather than being proactive. And this is where I think that we really should be working towards, is that we actually have a lot more ability than we sell to our clients. We can take time and look, like I said, look historically at what's been happening. There's a job that I just looked at, and over the last 60 years, there's been 5 feet of settlement in an area because of karst conditions. And we can take that to a client and say, even before we go out in the field and do any drilling, this looks like it's a bad site. Let me just show you some issues, and then we can design our subsurface program. If they want to go forward, we can design our subsurface program to look specifically at what the historical data appears to tell us. So I guess what I'm saying is that geotechnical engineering shouldn't be a second tier practice in civil engineering, shouldn't be a reactionary practice. So when there's a problem, call a geotech and he'll solve it. We should really be proactive. We should get up in front. We should help people understand the problems before they occur rather than after. And I would like to, in the last part of my career, I think I've got maybe 10 or 15 years left before I retire. I would really like to try to help us to change that mindset to being one of using all of the tools that we have available and not being so focused on, okay, I have a problem here. This is a particular type of facility, and this is the process that we use to come up with geotechnical recommendations, but to back up and look more broadly at the entire picture and manage the risk from a broad perspective. And I really, what we're going to try to do, I'm the chair of the Earth Retaining Structures Committee, is we're going to try to put these ideas into one of our one of the geostrata issues. We need to be more active there, but try to help people to think differently about how we practice our engineering, because I think there's so much value there that we just miss. We let people call us, and if we don't appreciate what we can do ourselves, then people will not appreciate it as well.
And of course, I think that's maybe the major contributor to the commoditization of geotechnical engineering. So
absolutely.
Kind of all starts within. It's very easy to blame a lot of other people, but I think you really hit it on the head here that there's maybe self-help is the right phrase to use here, that there's a lot of that needs to happen.
Yeah.
We've got 2 questions left. This one I've wanted to ask on one of these shows for a long time, and I don't know why it didn't bubble to the top until now. I have to ask, what was the most overwhelming moment of your life? And it can be a positive, negative, or a neutral, just a moment where you just felt slammed with emotion for whatever it was.
Several years ago, and let me preface this by saying that I have stood on or been in what I would consider to be a very sacred places. When I say sacred, I mean to where your spirit is just completely at peace and you just feel positive energy. And throughout my life, I've been in various places like that. But several years ago, my family and I had an opportunity to take a driving trip through Europe. And we started in England, and we went to Ireland. We took a ferry across Ireland, and then we took the Channel and went into Paris, rented a car in Paris, and drove all the way down to the Mediterranean coast, and went all the way down along the Italian coast to Rome, and then came back through and ended up in Normandy at the end of near the end of our trip. And we went to Omaha Beach. And I stood there. First of all, my sons, we decided we'd charge the beach. So we went out into the water, and my wife videotaped as we're charging the beach, But as I stood there and I realized what had happened at that beach, and how many men had sacrificed their lives for people that they would never meet, people that they would never know. Thousands and thousands of people in order to liberate. That was probably the most overwhelming and, in my opinion, the most sacred place that I've ever stood. And it's just a wonderful experience.
And I can totally get that. And this is the 3rd time, I think, that this has come up on Director's Cut. As Jean-Louis Briot talked about working on a slope stability project there for... I think the military cemeteries fall under the Army in the U.S. and reflected on what that meant to him and how his parents were liberated during the war. And then we actually had a Geostrata Extra last year on Memorial Day on the geotechnics of the D-Day invasion. So we'll put the links to those down in the show notes. That was a great answer, Glenn, and hopefully I get to experience that someday too. I've never been. So we're going to wrap up with this one. Now, This question has been altered a little bit because we have a very exciting announcement of a new show that we're going to be premiering during Geo-Congress week. So I'll ask the question first, and then we'll talk about the show a little bit after that. What is the second craziest field story you have from the width and breadth of your career?
Okay, well, not too long ago, there was an emergency, a dam emergency in Central Florida where a particular structure was near failure. And this particular structure had a tow drain and a liner underneath it because they had to separate the surface water from the groundwater. There's a reason for doing that. And there was a failure of a liner system which put pressure in the toe of the dam. And the way that started showing up is this liner started to lift off of the tow drain ditch. And I think I mentioned to you, I figured that I was looking at how high it was lifting, and I figured there was probably about 15 feet of head difference. And I stood on the toe of this dam with a power hand auger, another senior geotechnical engineer, and a senior technician. And we were puncturing holes in this liner in order to drain the pressure. So if you can imagine 3 guys, and this wasn't that long ago for me, but 3 guys, 2 of us had a hold of the, actually all 3 of us had a hold of the auger, and we're lifting it up and it had a sharp point on it, and we had to actually puncture this thick liner. And then as soon as it would puncture, you'd see this water just shooting out. In order, and we're in full waders, so just an incredible experience. And while that's happening, I turn to the other geotech engineer and I said, look, this is dam safety engineering in practice. This is where the tire hits the road. If you want to save a dam, this is how you save it. And sure enough, we were able to save it.
So when you guys went out there that day, did you know what the solution was going to be, or had you planned to do something totally different?
It was a very fluid environment, and we knew that we couldn't build up if the pressure got too high in the toe, we would trigger a failure, and then there would be all sorts of problems.
Right.
So we had the idea that we would have to puncture. We didn't know we'd have to do it that much, and while we were out there, another emergency occurred on another part of the facility, and so I mean we're just scrambling around. We end up puncturing several holes, and then we have to hike out because something else was going on. But it was very fluid. So no, it wasn't planned. We did have the auger out there because we thought we might need to do that, but it was the last straw that we needed to. We needed to relieve that pressure, and it was the only way to relieve it.
Well, some quick thinking and probably averted a much worse situation for a lot of people. So that's great. So I want to remind everybody that's only Glen's second craziest story. So he's got something even better. And we're very excited to announce that we'll be starting a new show / podcast / vodcast, if anybody uses that word anymore. The week of Geo-Congress. It will be called Field Trips, and it will be short stories from our members about the craziest, the wildest field experience they have ever had. It might be a technical issue that they solved. It might be something completely non-technical that they had to deal with while they were on a job site or out in the field. So you can look forward to the premiere of that show, again, the week of Geo-Congress, which is the week starting March 21st. Look forward to that. So Glen, you made it through all the questions today, and you did it with aplomb. It was excellent. And this was a great conversation. And so our viewers out there, if you liked what you saw, again, click subscribe, click get notifications. We'll keep you in the know. We will notify you every single time we post something to the YouTube channel, which is frequently. So Glen, thank you very much for doing this today.
You're welcome.
And I think it was a good time. And every week I could say this, I really learned a lot. And it was a lot of fun. And thanks all you viewers for sticking around. And we will see everybody with a brand new Director's Cut next week.